It was supposed to be a quick favor. My best friend, Alana, called me one Saturday morning asking if I could drop her 17-year-old brother Jake at his part-time job. I'd known Jake since he was a kid, and it didn't seem like a big deal. I told her yes without thinking twice. Jake hopped in my car wearing a hoodie and headphones. He nodded a thanks, and we drove off in silence for a few minutes before he suddenly asked, "Can I talk to you about something? But you can't tell Alana." His voice cracked in a way that told me this wasn't about school or his job. I said sure, not expecting the story that followed. Jake hesitated, then said, "It's about your boyfriend." I felt my hands tense on the steering wheel. "What about him? I saw him last week, with someone else." The car ride suddenly felt suffocating. My boyfriend Darren and I had been together for over a year. Things hadn't been perfect. We'd been distant lately, and he always had an excuse for skipping date nights, but I never suspected anything concrete. Jake told me he had gone to a local cafe to meet a friend. That's where he saw Darren, not just with a girl, but holding her hand across the table. He described her, blonde, older than him, laughing like they shared a long history. Jake didn't want to say anything to Alana or me until he was sure it wasn't just a misunderstanding. But a few days later he saw them again, in Darren's car parked at the lake. My heart sank. What made it worse wasn't just the betrayal. It was that it wasn't physical infidelity alone. It sounded emotional. The kind of intimacy Darren hadn't given me in months. I didn't know whether to thank Jake or break down. Later that night, I confronted Darren. I expected denial, anger, maybe guilt. Instead, he looked exhausted. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. I felt seen by her. I could talk to her in ways I couldn't with you anymore." That stung more than if he had just said it was a fling. He'd shared emotions with someone else. His thoughts, his frustrations, his vulnerabilities. Things I thought were reserved for us. What followed were weeks of confusion, crying, and late-night conversations with Alana, who, despite her loyalty to her brother, stood by me. Darren and I tried couples therapy, but it only highlighted how far apart we'd already drifted. The emotional connection he'd built with someone else had already replaced what we had. That kind of betrayal isn't visible like lipstick on a collar, but it burns deeper. It started like any other ordinary Saturday. The kind where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. I was sipping my second cup of coffee when Alana called. Her voice hurried, asking if I could give her little brother, Jake, a lift to his part-time job. I had known Jake since he was barely old enough to speak, back when he used to tag along on our sleepovers and beg us to let him join our games. Saying no didn't even cross my mind. The car ride was quiet at first, Jake glued to his phone like any other teenager. But then, somewhere between the neighborhood and the traffic light near Holloway Street, he pulled off his headphones and mumbled, "Can I ask you something? But you have to promise not to tell Alana." That sentence hit harder than expected. There was something tight in his voice, nervous, like he was holding a live wire and didn't know how to let go of it. I glanced over, expecting something trivial, maybe a girl he liked, a bad grade, but what he said next changed everything. "It's about Darren." My stomach flipped. My boyfriend, the person I thought I knew inside and out. Darren had been acting different lately, more distracted, quick to irritate, checking his phone during dinner. I had chalked it up to work stress, but Jake's tone said otherwise. He went on to tell me he'd seen Darren at a cafe a few days earlier, with someone else, a woman, not someone from work or a friend he had ever mentioned. He described her appearance in sharp detail, long blonde hair, maybe in her late 20s, too comfortable, too familiar. The kind of familiarity that only comes with emotional closeness. But what hit hardest was when Jake added, he was holding her hand, not like a friend, like he didn't care who saw. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, and suddenly I felt like I was in someone else's car, in someone else's life. Jake looked out the window the whole time, barely able to meet my eyes. I could tell he wasn't just uncomfortable. He was scared to hurt me. That kind of sincerity doesn't come from malice. It comes from watching people you care about drift unknowingly toward heartbreak. I didn't cry, not in that moment. I just nodded, thanked him quietly, and dropped him off like nothing had happened. But inside, a floodgate had opened. What's worse than being cheated on is not even knowing it's happening. And hearing it from Jake, someone too young to carry that kind of burden, only made it harder. That short ride broke something in me, because in just 10 minutes, Jake had unknowingly handed me a truth I wasn't ready for. A truth that hinted not at lust or physical betrayal, but something deeper, a connection built behind my back, a secret world I hadn't been invited into, and somehow that made it even worse. By the time I got home after dropping Jake off, my body was on autopilot. I walked inside, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of my couch staring at the floor. His words echoed louder now, no longer muffled by the hum of the car engine. He was holding her hand, not like a friend. I wanted so badly to pretend I misheard, to dismiss it as teenage exaggeration, but deep down it fit too well. It explained Darren's late replies, his sudden interest in solo drives, the emotional emptiness that had crept into our conversations like fog. When I finally asked Darren that night, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply asked, "Is there someone else?" He blinked at me slowly, the kind of pause that confirms everything without needing a word. Then came the quietest, most devastating confession I've ever heard. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I felt like I could talk to her, like she got me. That broke me more than if he had confessed to sleeping with her. Because I had given him my heart, my fears, my dreams, and he had given that part of himself, those sacred emotional pieces, to someone else, we always think of cheating as a physical act, sex, kissing. Tangible evidence, but this was different. He had fallen into someone's emotional orbit and left me emotionally stranded. He didn't deny he still loved me, but he also didn't deny that he needed her. That made it even messier. The emotional betrayal felt like being slowly unstitched from the inside. I kept thinking back to moments where he had smiled at me, knowing now that someone else was already holding space in his thoughts. I remembered every conversation that now felt hollow in hindsight. His compliments that no longer felt real, his tired excuses that once sounded reasonable, his lack of interest in our future plans. I asked him if it was physical. He hesitated, then said, "Not really, just one kiss." But that didn't matter anymore. He had felt more for her than he was willing to feel for me. He had built a small emotional home with someone else and left me standing outside the door. We tried to fix things at first, therapy late, night talks, silent dinners where our food went cold because neither of us could pretend. But emotional infidelity creates a wound that doesn't scab over easily. There's no clean betrayal to point to, just small, repeated absences. Moments when one person chose to share themselves with someone who wasn't you, and worst of all, I found myself envying this other woman. Not for her looks or what they did together, but for being the person he confided in, for hearing the pieces of him I used to hold, that feeling, that hollow jealousy, ate away at myself, worth. In the end, the secrets didn't just damage our relationship. They damaged me, and what made it all the more painful was how it began so quietly. A soft, familiar car ride with a teenager who unintentionally exposed just how far I'd already been left behind.